Horikosh is a collection of capes, peninsulas, and islands, surrounded by a sea so shallow that when the tide goes out twice a day, you can walk between any two landmasses on foot. I'm confident that most of my viewers have never heard of this place, or the ethnic group that lives there, the Horiti. The main language they use to communicate with one another is called Horiti, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about their liturgical language, the one that they use in their magic making, the language of the gods. In order to describe a language as steeped in history as the language of the gods, we need to start at the beginning with the sacred stories of the Horiti. Thousands of years ago, the gods resolved to give some of their divine power to the Horiti, for the Horiti lacked any dominion over reality. In order to do this, they decided to create a language that humans could use to help one another heal, battle with rival ethnic groups, build, and destroy. But you all know how group conlang projects usually go. Legend describes a century of development before the language was given to the Horiti. At the beginning, the gods worked together to create a cohesive grammar and lexicon, as well as a sound system. But as they began to flesh out more details, they began to argue. The gods began to take strong opposing stances as to what the grammar should be, which words should mean what, and so on. None of them were willing to compromise at a large scale. In the end, what they gave to the Horiti was far from the ideal they set out to create. Okay, so I should start going over the phonemic inventory and all that. Or phonemic inventories. Horiti linguists usually analyze 53 separate inventories, one for each of the 53 Horiti gods that made the language. I suppose you could analyze it as one phonemic inventory, but that analysis is much more complicated and much less useful, so I don't prefer it. Let's look at some examples of these per god phonemic inventories. Here are the phonemes according to the god of law. Here are the phonemes according to the god of citrus and love. Here are the phonemes according to the god of plants and decay. While they vary, there are usually at least two contrasting series of plosives, palatal sounds, and the glottal stop, as well as no rhotic. There are also at least 5 vowels. Oh, by the way, I'm using Western linguistic notation because most of this is based off of research I've done looking at Horiti magician linguistics, which can differ a little bit. Surprisingly, a lot of their analyses are similar to the ones that I've learned in my formal linguistics training, but all of these charts are based off of rigorous linguistic work done by Horiti linguistic magicians, not me. I'd cite sources, but nothing is published in a way I can cite it, and none of the books I'm using are mentioned online at all, which is a little weird. So, yeah, phonology. Contrary to popular belief, the phonology of a language is different from these charts here. These charts are inventories. Phonology is the study of how these sounds in the chart change, in what contexts, before they turn into the sounds that we end up pronouncing. There are a lot of phonological rules that can apply in the language of the gods, hundreds of them actually, and order matters. This is also really strange, but the order of these rules can change too. Horiti linguist magicians figured out a while ago that these sound changes can be favored or disliked by various gods, and while it's not trivial, it's possible to create a list of rules for each god. Here are some non-exhaustive examples of the most prominent phonological rules I've noticed for a few of these gods, but the Horiti usually conceptualize these rules as godless and apply them to appease as many gods as possible. This analysis was difficult for me to reconcile when making my final translation, so I collected lists of phonological rules that certain gods prefer, and also, where possible, syllable theory for each god. Now, a lot of these rules apply over word boundaries. When designing a spell, you will run into plenty of cases where two gods at a word boundary have completely opposing feelings towards a phonological rule. Or even worse, you'll have cases where one word contains morphemes from different gods with completely opposing feelings towards a phonological rule. Oh yeah, almost every word in a sequence comes from a different god. For whatever reason, sentences that include words from only 1, 2, or 3 gods just don't work. Even worse, sometimes they backfire, and I learned that the hard way. You see this wound on my finger? I was trying out a spell with the god of fermentation and patience, the god of flesh, bone, and sinew, and the god of sleep and comfort. My intent was to make an easy spell that would make me drowsy, but instead my skin started peeling off, so I don't recommend it, and neither do any of the Horiti linguist magicians who have said anything about it. So wouldn't it suck if, on top of all of this, each god had a completely different grammar? Well, they do. At least that's the analysis most Horiti linguist magicians use. Some pairs of gods have more compatible grammar than others, but no two grammar systems are exactly alike. Some gods don't care too much about some grammatical features, but most gods dislike most grammatical features that aren't included in their ideal version of what the language should be. You can tell this is the case because the way a spell backfires is always related to the god that has been grammatically slighted the most. It's actually really funny, but it can be dangerous to test this out. Or you can use a pendulum, but more on that later. There are, however, some trends in the grammar. Broadly, there are 3 categories: mostly isolating languages, moderately synthetic languages, and polysynthetic languages. In the translation portion of the video, you'll get a chance to see these in action, but before we move from the grammar, I'll quickly explain the concept of a matrix language, because it'll come in handy. In code switching, the matrix language is the language that governs the grammar of a segment of language. This can change mid-sentence, and often does, but the only analog to this I've seen in Horiti linguistic texts is for sentences in which the matrix language is polysynthetic. In these cases, the whole sentence is usually a single very long word, and linguist magicians describe one of the languages involved as the matrix language. Well, they don't use the English word matrix, obviously. Most polysynthetic grammars use triggers that specify the meaning of affixed constituents. So if you change this trigger, the roles change completely, even though the rest of the word remain the same. This is kind of like Austronesian morphosyntactic alignment, but polysynthetic. The god of motion and broken objects actually uses 3 mandatory triggers, one for each of the first 3 embedded nouns. Word order is usually pretty free, at least while creating spells. As long as each noun in a sentence is marked with an adposition or case marking or something, the same spell can still function if words are swapped. Many gods seem to favor certain word orders though, so often it's a bit of a battle to figure out if using a specific order to get all of the phonological rules that apply at word boundaries is worth upsetting a god who really likes their word order a certain way. A lot of these grammars have gender systems that encode a quality that other languages would have a word for. The god of snow and pain, for example, has genders for cold and warm and lacks broad terms for either of those things. The god of the summers, agriculture, and wild animals has a wild/domesticated gender split. The god of plants and decay has a fresh and decayed split. Sometimes affixes to agree with these genders need to be put on the verbs or adjectives of other gods, which may upset those gods. Yet another thing where you gotta weigh the consequences. Okay, let's move on from grammar now. What are we moving on to? Grammar number 2! Oh god, okay. So if you're going for a spell that works, the grammar can be pretty restrictive unless you're cool with negative side effects like this little battle wound of mine. It's best to stick with a handful of gods that work well together, but spells that only involve grammar from 4 gods are weak. In order to cast more powerful spells, you need to include words from more gods. You need to include more sentences, and the sentences need to be longer. The more words and the more gods, the more powerful the spell is. But also, the more difficult it is to get all the words to play nice. You might end up with a spell that works, but leaves 6 of the 7 gods cursing you in the spell's effect. The goal is usually to limit these negative side effects. This is where the 3 loopholes come in. For the first one, you can take any word and start a new sentence coming off of it. You can do this twice. You can make 2 of these sentences meet up at the end. You can make them intersect. You can make these extra sentences refer directly to each other. But these extra sentences aren't spoken. They can be written, and they have been for centuries, but before they were written, a magician would need to envision, without a writing system, these words intersecting and coming off of one another. Back then, only a select few who could visualize this could cast truly powerful magic, but since the invention of writing, more and more people have been able to get into complex spellcraft. Oh yeah, writing. Would it surprise you if each god had their own preferred writing system? Probably not, but would it surprise you if they still shared a set of logographic symbols but used them for different words or meanings? Probably not, but would it surprise you if the god of law had 2 writing systems? Probably not, but figuring out the writing systems is a whole other headache that I won't delve into in this video, because the writing system looks, like this, and it breaks into parts like this, which is kind of hell to figure out. How do these extra sentences help mitigate side effects? Well, it's simple. Let's look at the second bit of my translation for the circus. This word means in known manner, which is a very common phrase in spells that involve the god of law. Here it's a translation of surely, but coming off of it is a word from the god of knives and poison. This word clarifies the meaning without impacting the flow of the primary sentence. Otherwise, the spell may only work if cast in a pit filled with oats or something, I don't know. Oh yeah, stay tuned for the translation portion, which will be a full spell that, if it works, should make a snake curl up such that its tail is in its mouth. But I guess we'll never know because I do not have a snake. There are 2 other main ways Horiti magicians prevent negative side effects in spells, and both of these are more like bandages and less like wearing a glove while using a hot glue gun. The first is components. The gods gave the language as a gift, but they didn't necessarily expect the gift to be received without reciprocation. If you include specific components in your spell, the gods may be willing to overlook some of the grammar or phonology. In order to tell a god that a component is for them, you simply need to describe it in part of the spell, usually as an inserted subposition, which is like a preposition except for it marks a sentence or noun phrase connecting to it non-linearly instead of something before it or after it. Unfortunately, like everything in this language, gods have preferences for components, and sometimes 2 gods will like the same component, so the spell needs to specify how the component is supposed to be divvied up, and sometimes it's important to say, by the way, this component is not for this god, to make sure that they don't get any of it, to prevent them from getting mad at you. It's really important. You can tell which gods like or dislike a component with a pendulum. Put the component directly in front of you and hold the pendulum in between you and the component. Speak the name of the god or their domain in any language. If it moves towards and away from the component, they highly favor it. If it moves left and right, they might dislike it when it shows up in a spell. Later on I'll use a variety of components for the translation portion, but I'll have to check to see if the gods like them before I use them in the spell, just to make sure. You can also use pendulums to check if a sentence works, or to practice. Holding a pendulum is a way of signaling to the gods, hey, I'm not actually casting the spell, so I've run through parts of my spell dozens of times with a pendulum to make sure they're grammatical. It's kind of like a spiritual version of a compiler for computer coding. The other method is prayer. Often gods are willing to overlook some misgivings if you praise them in their preferred usage of the language, so many speakers will start with a long set of prayers, or tack them on at the end, or feature them in the middle. The nature of these prayers and the exact grammatical features the gods will overlook as a result is very, very complicated, and there are often special books about this too. If you include too many prayers for one god, especially prayers that are unneeded to make the spell work, the other gods will get upset, so you can't just repeat every single prayer ever for a god that's causing problems for you. And even if you could, it would take a really long time. There are hundreds of prayers for each god, venerating them in myriad ways. Here on screen are several prayers translated into English for the god of snow and pain, and there's a special type of prayer bead you're supposed to hold for that portion of the spell. It's fine if you don't have them, they're kind of hard to find, but holding them can vastly decrease risk. I don't have them, so I guess I'm living life on the edge. Before we get into the lexicon, let's go into the history and usage of spell creation. It turns out most spells were figured out centuries ago. What works continues to work, so there are spell books available similar to cookbooks, but much more precise. These books are often mass-produced on printing presses with spell sheets in them. As long as you can pronounce the oral component of the spell, have the nonlinear parts written down correctly, and have any required physical components around, the spell will work as desired. You don't necessarily need to understand the grammar or meaning behind it, but a lot of these books will explain it anyway, and later on that's what I'm going to try to do on screen. These descriptions also detail a lot of subtext in spells, because a good spell will be filled with yaoi, but more on that later. There are some very simple spells that everyone knows, like the spell for setting kindling on fire, or the spell for waning pain slightly. These spells are very simple grammatically. Alright, lexicon time! Like most other things in this language, Hority linguist magicians say that each god has their own lexicon. The worst part about this is that, unfortunately, while a lot of gods may share a word between their lexicons, the meaning can be completely different. So the best dictionaries will list these disagreements. Like here's an entry for the word shift in the God of Snow and Pain's lexicon, which I have so kindly translated into English for you from the original Hority it was written in. Note first that there are 6 other gods, each notated with their sigil, and some of them are very similar, but differ in a few ways, and in those cases there will be a small superscript circle and a short description of the differences. Then come the gods for which the meaning is completely different, and they are notated the same way, save for the superscript circle is crossed out as a way to indicate that the meaning is different enough to need some level of compensation within the spell. For some reason, it's not traditional to write the pronunciation of the word in other languages, but that actually makes sense for the less idealized analysis most of the linguistic magicians use. Where yeah, it's useful to have a lexicon per god, but words aren't really tied to specific gods. Next, after all that, you'll find the logogram. I'm not going to get into the writing system, but the colors help you figure out how to connect the symbols together, which can get complicated. There are sigils next to this logogram to show you what the same logogram means in the lexicons of other gods, in addition to what the word itself is in those other languages. I've transcribed their underlying forms here in IPA, but in the actual entry it will be written in whatever the god's writing system is. The reason why the pronunciation is written here is because logograms aren't considered the same as the words they represent, and this logogram represents 2 other words from 2 other gods. Oddly enough, it is the same logogram for a different word with the same meaning in the lexicon of the god of breath and wind, which gets into the whole thing where some spells can only be written and some spells can only be spoken, and some spells need to be a mix of both, but for this video I'm sticking with the spoken version of this language. Next over here you'll see a short paragraph describing the usage of the word. I've abridged this one because in the dictionary I translated from it's actually 5 paragraphs long, so here's the gist. Next come the references. Each of these, of which there are typically anywhere from dozens to hundreds, reference a published spell, published in a spellbook, that uses the word to call upon the god of snow and pain. There's no standard way to categorize spells, so the lexicographer gets to decide how they want to do it. This one put the name of the spell author and a short description of what the spell does. Alright, pragmatics time. The gods have a very complex interlinking social group between them, shaped by centuries of stories that, when referenced in a spell, give the spell more power. All of the gods are characterized as male, so the best analog for this in my culture is a giant gay polycule. The more yaoi included in a spell, the more powerful it is, and the more gods will overlook the grammar and word choices. And finally, allowing gods to comment on the words of other gods is really important. It's hard to know exactly how to do this, but sometimes the domains of the gods can clue you in. When creating a spell, you can use a pendulum to ask a god if they would comment something, and they will answer with a yes or no. Then you can guess a bunch of things and see how excited they are by your suggestions. You can make a pendulum out of dental floss and a rock if you need to. That's what I did. Next, spells must be sung. Well, smaller, weaker spells don't need to be sung, but the gods are all fans of music. One spell can use as many melodies as you can fit into it, but most magicians use a maximum of 5 melodies in one spell, barring extremes. Gods have very minor preferences for melodies, but usually it doesn't impact the spell too much, at least that's what I've read. I may use a mix of this melody and traditional Hority cantillation for my translation and record it ahead of time for your enjoyment. Traditional Hority cantillation is similar to Indian classical music in a lot of ways, but it also reminds me of the Jewish concept of a nigun. Some spells need to be cast with multiple musicians supporting the caster. I do not have multiple musicians, so I'll add other music stuff in the background. I've recorded the vocal portion ahead of time, and I'll have it playing out loud for when I perform the spell. I don't see why that wouldn't work. Also, it lets me work in the musicians. Also, while not required, going out and getting some of the components yourself for a spell can increase the favor, but I'm kinda lazy and I have all the ones I need at home, I think. Here's my list, let's see. 2 metal spheres, few blades of grass, a whetstone and a knife. Gathered! I'll start soaking the whetstone because I'll need to wet the knife on it for the later part of the spell. Next, I'll need several spices. Good thing I have a giant spice collection. Let's see, small, very spicy chilies. Good thing I have these African devil chilies. Or I could bust out my ghost peppers for this one. Nah, I'll save them for something else. We need some salt-cured rosebuds. Well, I have this box of old salts from my parents. Maybe there's something with rosebuds in it? Oh, hell yeah, actually, for the spell to work, these need to have been given as a gift, or they need to be given as a gift after the spell is completed, and I got these from my grandmother, so that's perfect. Black cumin, awesome, I have plenty of that. Now, korarima pods. What? I only have the seeds. Fuck, I gotta get some whole korarima pods. Okay, I guess I'm going to New York.
Citizen passengers in the terminal, this is the Phonology boarding call for 74795 with service to Chicago Midway.
Welcome aboard.
Okay, here's where I get my spices. Korarima, korarima, korarima. Yes! I also picked up some other spices to restock my amazing spice collection. While I'm on the East Coast, I think I have a few more ingredients to pick up. Let's see what else we have here on the list. Horiti prayer beads? There are like no Horiti people living in New York, but my grandmother has actually been to Horikash. She's the only person I know who's been. She's brought a lot of jewelry abroad, as well as plenty of other trinkets. Let's go pay her a visit. I wonder if she's actually home. Grandma, what are you wearing?
I'm wearing my clothes.
It's so hot out. It's 80 degrees.
No, it's so cold in my apartment.
It's literally not cold.
Don't worry about it. This is what I wear at home.
Okay, all right. Whatever
So
you
what
say,
do
Grandma.
I owe the pleasure of your company today?
Do you have any Horiti prayer beads?
I actually do.
That's really, wow, that's awesome, because you're the only person I know who's actually been to Horikash. And if you didn't have them, I don't know where I would have gotten them. I need them for something.
Well, come, I'll show them to you.
Okay, all right.
Let's go. They're in my desk.
You mean that really old wooden...
Beautiful Biedermeier desk? Yes. Let me explain to you, when I landed, I saw these people, these crazy people in a circle chanting
Yeah?
in some strange spiritual language.
Was it by any chance the language of the gods?
Yes, it was.
Oh my god, I'm making a video about that.
Well, luckily I have these beads for you. I keep them in this secret passage.
That's not a drawer.
No, it's a secret door.
What? Grandma, why is there a banana in there?
Oh, that's my banana.
So we're
Now
just
I'll show
not gonna
you.
talk about the banana?
No.
What?
We'll talk about the beads.
Okay, all right.
Here are the beads.
Ooh, nice box.
Yes, I bought it in Cambodia. Isn't that strange?
I guess.
Yes, it is.
Whoa, those are pretty.
Look at these beautiful beads.
I don't think I've ever actually seen them in person.
Lucky I have them for you for your video.
Yeah, can I borrow them?
Of course, but you have to bring them back.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. I wouldn't dream of just
I'm
keeping
gonna
them.
Put them back in the box.
Mm-hmm.
Close them up nicely.
And we're not gonna talk about the banana?
No.
What?
Just gonna
Oh,
take the beads.
Okay.
And have a wonderful video.
Okay, all right.
Give me a kiss goodbye.
Mwah.
Now go.
Okay,
Go.
all right, goodbye. Glad I got out of there. What was up with the banana? I guess I'll never know. I'll do a grandma Q&A at 10,000 subscribers, so smash that subscribe button for a grandma. Okay, what have we next? Cat fur of an unsaturated color. Hi, sweet kitty cat. Oh my god, you're so cute, and I'm going to use your fur. Next we need, oh god, jellyfish powder and a shell filled with red sand from where the water flees the shore. How the hell am I gonna get that? Let me head over to Massachusetts real quick. Remember how the Hordeyti live in a land with plenty of capes and peninsulas? I think I should visit Cape Cod and see if there are any similar components that I can use for the spell. These are the flats. In Brewster, much like many of the capes in Hordecash, twice a day as the tide goes out, the water goes out about a mile from shore, leaving tidal beds of sand, filled with all sorts of sea creatures. I hope they'll have what I'm looking for here, because otherwise I'll have to completely rework the spell. Okay, here's the jellyfish the spell calls for. I had to dehydrate it with salt. I couldn't find a shell or red sand, but the pendulum says that this pink sand should work, so I think I'm fine. God, this low-key stinks though. Anyway, I have everything I need, so it's time to go back home to St. Paul. I forgot to mention, my aunt had this dried up salamander, which is really lucky. I forgot to film her giving it to me, oh well. And the spell calls for parsley, but all I have is dill, so I hope that'll work. As it goes, I'll put up explainers, details, and commentary about the choices I made. I'll use these little lines to help demonstrate where we are in a sentence and how it's connected non-linearly, though. And I'm not glossing the prayers because I didn't actually write them and they're pretty long, but I'll show an English translation. Now behold, a spell that, when cast, will cause a snake to eat itself uncontrollably.
ביטוי ובעץ' ושחש מלך איך שם תפחק גוז רמוי טיפוש לוקס וג'יאמו איך שם מוצ'י מזיב תרוך דום פוך שמשים ושנגוי חאב איקליב סנגת שויול אב כואשון חאב איפוג'י Pog absam anai Paronya baete ngoshenada pirashene bodele Tongela bishega olodoge vabielna paradine gobe Tadwa shime akadwa Nui Juir coach, rejoigne moi, mi, nene chadwich, a juir cop voir, revou in chinui dui, dali ball we cheat maul fiu a gak moy ait nuit a voli betu ketogu wazen Check out kitab met 11, 12 foliosk. Ten schlof de ziek o a dwosk ania zegt mol ja mol schau chazaf yosk mal kashka Jidang Magarajkaya Polde Wamata Sigit Japol Hikere Alebe Abasa Gemaloke Iskolich Fi ol vachting jam panach in im igholthan fi koshot dubo ish hexo nachbo kishli asho olamedha Jota Jolom Vidas Kombi Jona Shama Guava Uli Sata Jalom Dachuni Amcha Dadig Jet Satin ich kufote geintin schmetterlin von Korn und von Tod ich nicht wacht wie quick und tot wagt man Gama bhilo avish gizinya Ruchat atom Elohot malkat ha'olam Ogofafa gel shoshik espacito won ba'olui Tawa shugaki tawa kashi bin liu li fashi tingwa bagi shafaya ya wo ko tawa Restox
fuck.
Olaf halom ba.
Okay, let's start where we left off, which is at the end of the prayer section. Okay.
Olaf halom ba toch hitarabi. Chavoch moam parab hibra. Lenya boge kietetanu vcheret bat qimet albinya thodal vkagong chmal dchoch thoch zwak bal sanithog goka ish anyais mang Bajchon chedof apshach ebitois dchlok thoch lech gai qidon chaqavebsh panging shing guys net qahes teqwa hivij yakindat nakon shoth ebitois shkon pasin rtswa qarabag kho rat mshoks nra qabshar che gaya khol fi tiawaqak yet moklo shpop nit lol aqafashak gozgham iqi shobag la echshak